All right, we'll jump right into it. Thanks everybody for hanging in here. We're going to be here for half an hour, and then we've got a break for lunch until, I believe, 2:30. And today we're here to talk about dual-use satellites and the business environment and opportunities. So at the far end, we have Andrew Peterson, who's the CEO and co-founder of Array Labs. The center, we have Gareth Keane, who's a partner at Incutel. Did I get that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Which is a not-for-profit global investment platform for the U.S. intelligence community. And Jeremiah Pate is the founder and CTO at LunaSonde Resource Mapping. Gentlemen, would you like to take a sentence or two and just tell us what your companies were founded for and what you're doing, starting at the end there?
Sure, thank you. Great to be here with everybody. Array Labs builds advanced radar systems, either as radar payloads for bus providers and defense and commercial applications, and also building satellites on our own constellation to collect 3D imagery of the world. Great to be with everybody, and thank you.
So Incutel, for those who do not know us, we are a strategic investor that is a trusted bridge between government, venture capital, and commercial startups. We invest globally into innovation to enhance and further the national security mission. And we enable our partners to, number one, enhance their capabilities, number two, safeguard their missions, and number three, stay ahead of emerging threats. We work not just with the U.S. intelligence community, but with a number of other governments worldwide, and with what's now known as the DOW.
Great to be here. I'm Jeremiah Pate, and Orlando is my hometown, so it's great to be back. I'm founder and CTO of LunaSonde, and what we do is we're effectively like an MRI scanner for planet Earth. We use low-frequency radio technology to sense underground from air and space platforms, and so this has applications both in the mining industry and in the defense sector, hence why we're really a quintessential dual-use company.
And in case you're wondering, Jeremiah was successful from the age of about 14 on, I think. How old did we decide we were when we met?
I think I was 15, 16, yeah.
Good grief, I was already an old man. All right, I think you kind of touched on this in your descriptions, but can you give us just a broad definition of what a dual-use satellite is and what range of customers that would include?
Yeah, so a dual-use satellite or dual-use Earth observation platform, as we're all working on, here at least Jeremiah and I, is a platform that can be used for both government and national defense applications, and then also can be used for commercial applications as well. And so this is very helpful. You can have different product lines, you can have different revenue sources, you can be a little bit differentiated in where your customer bases are. Sometimes, government is booming, and that we have things like, Golden Dome that are going on, which allows us to have, some opportunities there. But then other times that may be a little bit lower, and having commercial as a secondary revenue stream can be very helpful as well. Synergistic in that way.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, as a civilization, we are users of tools, and any tool is inherently a dual-use item. You can use it for something that is targeted towards commercial activities. You can use it for something that's targeted more towards the defense or sort of dual-use aspect of things. So I think it's no different in space than it is to anywhere else. A tool is a tool.
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that space is one industry where dual use has been baked in since the very beginning. There's a reason why our first satellites were lofted on converted ICBMs.
Right.
So it's been dual use since October 7th, 1957 or so October 4th rather. But yeah, it's very much baked into the industry of dual use systems.
And yet, so I'm a child of the space age, obviously. I remember, like you said, these were launched on converted ICBMs, as were the earliest astronauts. But it seems like the way we're talking about dual use here is really more of a 21st century phenomenon, because, when I started covering launches and so forth, they were all national security launches. They were big, heavy, bespoke satellites that cost tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. This is not what you're building, right? I mean, the whole point of dual use is it's more affordable, I assume, sometimes off-the-shelf technology that can be used in both use cases by the consumer and by the military.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, most of the Earth observation dollars that flow into this industry are still being spent on reconnaissance programs by U.S. And other governments worldwide. These systems, exquisite systems, still exist. The idea of having a dual-use technology company or dual-use satellite platform that can collect imagery for both commercial use cases and government use cases is exactly, as you mentioned, a more recent sort of 21st century phenomenon. There are some advantages and some things that come from having lower cost, smaller satellites that can produce imagery more rapidly and more cost effectively. There are companies like Maxar that have been doing this for a couple decades now. And there's been a wave of new companies, Planet Labs and other folks that have been coming out for maybe the last 10, 15 years, kind of trying to do a 2.0 version of a dual-use technology platform. But there's some advantages to this. There's some disadvantages to this. Having lower cost imagery is a very good thing, and having that available for defense use cases is very valuable. There's also some advantages. We can share that data more readily with international partners because it's not coming from an exquisite government-owned system. There are also some disadvantages for this as well, especially within U.S. defense community. They're used to having an exquisite image. They're not primarily a cost-constrained buyer. They're going to get the best quality thing that they'd like to see. And so I think there's opportunities where, we can make things a little bit cheaper, but also there's still a pull and still a draw and still a lot of room for building kind of bespoke, more exquisite things, maybe not at quite the price point of primes, but maybe somewhere in between that are still captured and owned by defense customers. But kind of a little bit of a landscape as we've gone. Yeah.
I think just to double click and maybe expound on that a little bit, I think you've identified that very often, I don't think the primes are going to go away. These very exquisite, very expensive, bespoke instruments, which USG builds, will continue to be a backbone of our ability to understand what's happening in the world around us, an increasingly complex and dangerous world in many ways. But there are places where, for example, as Andrew identified, sharing that data with allies is challenging because it reveals some aspects about maybe the capability of the systems that USG has deployed. So there's definitely an opportunity for companies, commercial space companies, to provide similarly flavored data, maybe not quite as precise or as kind of high resolution, but able to give effectively the same information once somebody knows where to look. And that, I think, is a very interesting use case for dual use technology in lots of ways. And I do as well feel that the revolution we have seen around the cost of access to space, the ability for commercial off-the-shelf technology, a lot of which was being democratized by industries like consumer electronics, right? The smartphone has been a driver of some incredible advances around communications and compute fabrics. Those really have enabled commercial satellite builders to almost replicate the decades of effort that we've seen on the very high value prime-driven capability in a very low cost, very almost attritable kind of form factor.
Okay.
And even with that, companies that started with these 1U, 2U, 3U CubeSat form factors have essentially migrated up the value chain, right? They've started building larger, more capable satellites. Because even if you're building a very cheap imaging satellite, you still can't get around the laws of physics, right? The optical aperture you have in a 10 centimeter form factor doesn't really show you anything very useful. And that's where I think some of the folks who are building things like radars and other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum for observation purposes really do have advantages. They don't have to worry too much about the cost of their optics, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're going to see, or I'm excited to see and explore in the same way that you mentioned, is starting with a dual-use platform, being able to build something that is a little bit lower resolution, a little bit lower cost, and have that serve both commercial and defense use cases. But as you get good at that, and there's no reason that you have to stop with that aperture size, right? The same company that can build a satellite that can produce 30 centimeter resolution data, which is very good, but not as good as an exquisite system, could then go and build another satellite, right? That could get to 20 or 10 centimeter resolution, and then and probably do it in a very different price point. May not have all the bells and whistles, but could do it at a very different price point than a traditional prime contractor could, right? And so we're seeing the rise of companies like Onderol, where we're going to build it first, and we're going to build a little bit more efficiently, and then we're going to turn that around with sort of neo primes. I think this is still kind of an untapped, potential market for a lot of Earth observation companies today.
So I kind of want to reposition for a second here. So let's just extend our imaginations out into the big dark skies and say that I was smart enough to stop being a space rider and decide I wanted to be an entrepreneur, which would not end well. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, I did. If I'm looking for opportunities on the commercial side, because I think we kind of get what the military is after in broad terms, but if I'm looking for opportunities unusual or to fulfill the pipeline for opportunities on the commercial side, what are some of the more unusual requests or customers you had for your data? And what were they looking for? You got to go first.
I have a really good one. We actually did a project with History Channel, which was one of my favorite projects I've ever done with LunaSonde. And it was for a TV show called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Great show. Highly recommend. And so they wanted us to look underground on this ranch in Utah. And so it doesn't get much more weird than that. It was a great show. We saw lots of weird things, but I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about it. But
did you work with Ancient Aliens?
Well, so it's the same production company
as
Ancient Aliens. Yeah. So it was an interesting time.
You met the unit.
I met the unit. Okay. Yeah. So that was
enough said.
That definitely topped the weirdness scale for us.
Okay, beat that, guys.
By no means. I'll return back to what customers want and what's valuable to them. I think both of our companies are in a unique position as we're building volumetric data sets, building 3D data sets. And the way that we do that is by using different types of radar technology. And this always opens up a lot of questions because, we have a very visually centric sort of view of the world. It matches kind of our eyes. You want to see a picture from a satellite. This is a very normal modality for us to all imagine. And then the question is, well, if you're a buyer of this sort of data, what are you trying to get from it? What are you trying to do with it? And how valuable is that, right? And so a lot of times we use visual data. We can maybe do something like counting, like how many cars are there in this parking lot, or how many aircraft are lined up along this runway, or how many tanks are in this column. And that's really useful, and especially useful in defense applications. But when you're talking to a commercial company, maybe a mining company, maybe an insurance company, maybe a utilities company, what are they trying to find out, right? And what are different ways that you can do things? So our 3D data sets that we're building a 3D map of the world, and you can use this for things like line of sight analysis, right? Mm-hmm. If you place an antenna here, how many users can be in view of this antenna, right? And there's a dollar implication of that, not having to send a human to try to perform the same analysis or have a plane collect the same data. Or if you're looking at change at a mine, right? What slopes are changing, what volumes are changing, how are all these things evolving over time, and knowing where to go to dig, for example, is a tremendously valuable application. But it all talks, to what is the data, what are you measuring, and how valuable is that to an actual person who's going to pay for it and be able to use it in whatever their application is. And to your point, I think we're just scratching the surface on some of these things and exploiting exactly the commercial electronics industry to sort of bring that to the fore is really, really an exciting place to be.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting point. I think if you had told anybody 20 years ago that the handheld device in your pocket with its 5-cent GPS chip would have enabled a company like Uber, people would have been, I don't believe it, that will never, ever happen. I think there are going to be use cases and sort of businesses built with data from space that we just don't really understand or kind of can grok just yet. I do feel we have the luxury as an investor of seeing not just the Earth observation market, everything else across the space value chain. I do feel communications, again, as a society, we basically have an insatiable demand for bandwidth. So I think the interesting moves we're seeing, we've talked a little bit about it in this meeting already over the last couple of days, but direct-to-device connectivity for both a commercial user and potentially a US government use case, those are pretty interesting capabilities, and I think that will be a big economic driver over the next 5, 10, multiple years in the future. And then we've actually just disclosed an investment in VAST, one of our sponsors here today. So human spaceflight. I don't think humans in space will ever not be a thing. Automation, robotics, the ability to put exquisite sensors into space to generate interesting Earth observation data. Very, very large part of the market, but humans in space is an important thing. So we're pleased and excited to support the VAST team as they go out and start making us a truly multi-planetary species.
You got anything, Jeremiah, or shall we move on?
Well, no, that's about it on that topic.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So a lot of what you do is resource mapping, both surface and subsurface, and more than that. If we look out, I mean, Earth is an obvious target, but now we're talking about cislunar and lunar for a lot of this. What do you see as the future of the utility of resource mapping in terms of exploitation done tastefully?
Yeah, so this is an area that's very near and dear to my heart, and this is also the reason why LunaSonde is called LunaSonde and not TerraSonde. It's really based on the idea that one day Earth can be zoned residential, and we can get our raw materials from deep space. We're always going to need raw materials as a civilization. I mean, that's the one constant since Paleolithic times, and now we need these raw materials to have progress and to maintain our quality of life. And so the cleanest mining is mining that doesn't take place on Earth at all. And that's why I founded LunaSonde, is really to build upon this idea of finding resources on the moon, on Mars, on asteroids. And so I think the future of mining is going to be mining in space. There's actually going to be a day where it's cheaper to mine in space than on Earth. We're drilling deeper and deeper to find raw materials. We're looking further under the surface. And so one day it's going to be cheaper to fly all the way out there than to dig under tons and tons of rock to find resources here. And so that's really where I see the 20-year vision of my company and the industry going.
I think I would just add to that there's no real rational reason why we should lift stuff out of the Earth's gravity well if we decide to go out into the solar system, right? It makes much more sense to take advantage of what people call in situ resources. The emerging cislunar economy is certainly very interesting to us. I have been lucky enough to have been involved prior to IQT with a number of companies that have been focused on the developments that are happening out there. But there are, I think, a lot of barriers around infrastructure from the point of view of power or communications, things like position, navigation, timing. There's opportunities, I think, for companies to figure out how to build an interesting business providing those sort of fundamental enablers for lunar and for other sort of applications in the solar system.
Okay.
I think we've covered resources enough. I'll pick up on your topic of infrastructure and new infrastructure. And infrastructure that we have now, especially as it relates back to, our shared passion on radar, which is, if you imagine radar, space-based radar today, it's sort of like where space was 20 years ago. Every mission 20 years ago was very expensive, and every launch was very expensive, and so progress is maybe a little bit slow, and sort of like in the time that we've gone from car phones and giant satellite phones to cell phones, we haven't really seen that sort of evolution in the radar industry side. At the same time, a lot of our airborne assets, a lot of our airborne radar aircraft, which we have quite a few of, and we have paid a lot of money for and continue to spend a lot to maintain, are going to be transitioning into a space environment, and that's a new opportunity for people to have the infrastructure. If we ask questions like, where are all the boats in the ocean? Well, you check the radar, right? Where are the aircraft flying around domestically or internationally? Well, check the radar. If you look at where satellites are in space, right? Certainly LEO satellites are all tracked by radar, and satellites beyond that are like not tracked, right? And so how are we going to build a new infrastructure layer that allows us to understand where aircraft are and where ships are and where satellites are, both in LEO and MEO and then beyond into GEO and cislunar? These are all starting to become very important questions for people to have answers to, and using and leveraging commercial electronics, coming back to your other point, into that environment, and taking the technology of cell phones and using it to attack the radar problem is it feels like a very, very good idea, and a place where we can make a lot of progress.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, we're getting in the speed round here. We got the 5-minute countdown, so I better get some questions in from the audience. From Anonymous, Gareth, what dual-use applications do you see for humans in space that prompted IQT's investments?
So a lot of the investments we make are purely for insight, for us to understand how markets are evolving. And I think the commercial space station sector is no different. There's multiple players there. We just like to know, are there ways to build a commercial business that will be effective? Does the US government need to support space station companies continuously? Will they be able to build a business themselves? I think there's obviously partners on the In-Q-Tel side, like Space Force, who are very, very important to us. The idea that you could sort of use that as a recruiting tool. If you want to be a guardian, I can send you to space. Well, that kind of appeals, I think, to a lot of people. So stuff like that could potentially be a direct applicability for In-Q-Tel's partner base, for sure.
Okay, and for anybody, how comfortable do you think the U.S. government is sharing platforms when you're also gathering data for commercial clients? Does there need to be a firewall there?
That's a great question, and I think the general answer is it depends, and I think there will always be budget. And I think there will always be an opportunity for limited dual-use imagery that's purchased off of a commercial satellite and a commercial platform. But fundamentally, the U.S. government likes to do hardware development programs, right? They want to go out, they want to research something, they want to build something, they want to own that thing, and they want to use that to have an advantage over adversaries around the world. And it's hard to do that, and hard to make the argument and the case for that if a mining company can also buy the exact same image that you're providing to the U.S. government. And so I think it's very important for Earth observation companies to have more flexibility than I think we've previously shown. If you would like an image, we're happy to sell you an image. If you'd like us to design a satellite that's exquisite and that meets your needs and does something that no other satellite in the world does, and you want to own that, great, we're happy to do that as well. If we can provide a radar solution that can be deployed on somebody else's satellite bus, we're also very, very happy to accommodate. But I think having channels and flexibility doesn't have to be a one-stop option, right? You can provide a menu of options for customers to meet them where they're at, and that way you can provide the best value for whomever it is that your stakeholder is that's trying to advance whatever their missions are. Because they're all a little bit different, and there are some different constraints, and I think that exactly that point, you can't just force them to just buy an image from you. This isn't a natural action for a lot of the defense community, for sure.
So does it get more complicated if you have an overseas customer?
So overseas customers is another great example, right? We've gone to overseas customers for a long time and said, hey, would you like to buy a stack of images? And that works pretty well, especially when they don't have their own indigenous capability to deploy their collection. But what they'd really like, right, obviously, is their own satellite, their own system that they can use and they can operate, right? And you can either sell them a satellite that's bespoke and does that mission for them, and they can own and they can operate it, which is something that we're starting to see happen more and more. Or even better than that, you can enable them to have their own capability, right? You can provide maybe the radar payload, for example, which is something that our company is looking to do. And then they can have their own satellite bus, they can mate those two things together, and then they can have their own vertical industry, their own built product in their own way that they can operate, and they can manage all the security things, all the other things that they'd like to supply there. So again, I think it depends, but I think there's some real big opportunities here over the next 10 years as we see this industry just increase quite a bit in sovereign satellite systems as well.
So I hate to do this to you guys because we have less than 2 minutes left, but if anybody wants to tackle this, how are the opportunities for what you do expanded with the incoming use of AI? Which could be another half hour. I realize.
So for us, it's a unique situation because we're dealing with a data set that not a lot of people have a familiarity with in their daily lives. I mean, satellite imagery, we've all been in a plane and looked out the window and saw the ground. And so we have this intuition of what that's supposed to look like and what that does look like. In our case, no one has the experience of peeling back a mountain and saying, oh, it's what a copper deposit looks like.
Oh, yeah.
And so we've had to integrate AI from the beginning, when it was still called machine learning before it got called AI. We've had to integrate that from the get-go in order to make the data intelligible and make it understandable. And so for us, we're really excited about this new emergence of LLMs, because we can digest a huge amount of data and make it understandable to the mine operator or to the defense customer that wants to see, okay, is this a dangerous underground facility, or is it just a harmless blob of geological features underground? How do we differentiate that? How do we go through that categorization problem? And AI, especially this current generation, is perfect for that.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think we've seen initiatives, Golden Dome's a great example, where the ability to do stuff on the edge in a very proliferated, sort of non-homogeneous architecture will shorten the time to respond to what might be a pretty serious threat. So AI at the edge is something we believe in very strongly.
Final word?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we're seeing most is that the cost of analyzing data, large volumes of data, is dropping because these things can be mechanized and these things can be done with an AI agent in a way that would typically take an operator or a team of operators, right? You know, you can imagine a script where you ask your favorite AI agent to go task an image, collect an image, maybe of many locations, maybe image all of the mines in the world, maybe analyze the volumetric change of those mines, maybe put that into a dashboard and a table, and please do that every week. That would typically require, 40, 50 people to go do all of this work of just scheduling the collections and tasking and processing all the data. And now you can do that, you can imagine doing that with the push of a couple buttons. And so I think this is going to continue, this is going to advance, and this is going to draw a higher need for better and faster data sources from space to be able to go answer all these questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the next space billionaires. Thanks for staying with us.